Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl. We are continuing our series of, super early Oscar predictions, but we are now in wave number 2, our May predictions. We did Best Picture, Director, and Screenplays last time. Now we are on to the acting categories where, we've had some major switch-ups in the past month, but also not a lot has changed. So it's more to a personal level of how much you're going to switch here, because some people completely redo their 10 every week. Some people take a long time to switch. So I'm going to kick things off this time with Best Actress, and there's some stuff I have changed majorly here, and there's some other stuff I haven't moved at all, including my number one. I still have Emma Stone in for Poor Things. I know the negativity, you could say, around this film due to its possible controversy with its MPAA rating, its subject matter, and everything like that. However, I feel like Emma Stone is one of those actresses who are beloved. Yes, she is still younger. Yes, she's already an Oscar winner. But sometimes we see, that love can carry over into your next real Academy type, sometimes that love can carry over into your next nominated performance and go to a win, just like we saw with Jennifer Lawrence earlier in her career. So I have her at number one, but I could easily see this dropping off and not even be nominated once we get a official screening, whether that is at Venice or at another film festival later in the year. At number 2 is where I have who I think Matt's number 1 is, Fantasia Barrera for The Color Purple. I think she's probably more likely to win. If I was doing a bet, I'd probably bet on her, but I'm just not really sure what to do with Color Purple at the moment. I feel like it will be an across-the-board player, but at the same time, how many wins will it get? An actress is a pretty big category to win with nothing else. We've seen it happen before. I just want to see something from this movie first, and once I see it, maybe I'll make my official switch. So, Matt, I know that you disagree with my number 1 and number 2, but any initial thoughts here?
You've been reading Poor Things. How are you feeling so far?
I haven't started.
No. Okay, well, we're in the same spot then, because I have the book too, and I'm about to start tonight. I just finished my last book, so I'm about to start too. Oh, I was hoping you'd have some a little bit of juicy intel, but no, I guess not. That's too bad. Okay, well then, I'm just gonna say the same thing I have been saying. Emma Stone, I am worried about. I actually have her in my top 5 because I moved. I actually do have Emma Stone in my top 5 now because I've moved Poor Things into my picture predictions because it looks like it's going to Venice. So with that being said, I think it might be a far shot for her to win. I think that might be a little bit tricky, especially because she has won in the past, not for a role like this, but we've seen her in roles like this in the past, and you kind of have to do something little fresh, and we've seen her do something not exactly like this, but we've seen a Lanthimos Emma Stone. I don't know if she'd win for this if she didn't for The Favorite. So I don't know. I feel good about her being in the top 5, but number 1, not sure. Number 2, Fantasia Barrino. You're gonna come around.
Probably,
that's what I'll say, especially after the CinemaCon reactions that we have, where people are saying that this feels fresh, it feels exciting, there's a distinct directorial voice behind it, the cast is insane. I'm just going to keep saying over and over what I have been saying about... I'm going to keep saying over and over what I have been saying about The Color Purple. This is the cast of the year. This is the ensemble people are going to want to root for. They're going to be so much fun to watch, especially if they start doing some festivals in the fall. Really hope that they do. People are going to want to see this cast win. People are going to want to see Fantasia Barrino win for this. So let's hope.
I fully agree with that take about this could be the Coda, the Parasite, the Everything Everywhere cast of the year. But also last year, people said that about Women Talking, and then obviously Everything Everywhere came in and stole that thunder. So even though Color Purples are early, hey, this is the fun cast that we want to reward, there could be another movie that comes out of nowhere and gets that acclaim. Moving on to my number 3 and number 4, I have Natalie Portman from May December. This one was a little bit higher for me last time, however, still, this movie has no distributor. That scares me a little bit, but it is going to Cannes, where that puts some more faith back into me. So I'm keeping it in my 5, but it's not my number 2 anymore. I think this will be a pretty safe nomination throughout the year, but for win, maybe, maybe not, unless Portman's giving something very phenomenal, maybe a career best over Black Swan, which is completely possible, just it's another thing where I gotta wait and see it before I can jump aboard that ship. Something that a lot of people have seen, but I still haven't, is Past Lives, and that brings Greta Lee at my number 4. I feel like she's probably not in winning competition, but just like Portman, she's pretty safe for a nomination. This movie has been seen, it has been acclaimed. The biggest thing is just, does it get A24's push, which at this moment it looks like all hands on board for A24. That brings me to my big question at number 5. There's a movie that makes sense to put here, and there's another movie that I'm feeling more of a gravitational pull. On paper, Annette Bening for Nyad, I know you've been hyping this performance up so far. She makes sense at number 5, but I'm making an audible here after the reactions yesterday at CinemaCon. We've been saying for years, Margot Robbie needs another Best Leading Actress performance. She missed out last year for Babylon, but Barbie could be it, and if Barbie is going to be a major player, I feel like she would have to come along. I know most reactions for this movie are highlighting more of Ryan Gosling and the production design, the cinematography, and a bunch of the visuals, and not so much her performance, but the movie could come out and people are gravitating to her performance. So I think this far out, I'm going to take a little bit of a risk. I'm going to put her at my number 5, have Annette Bening at 6, and then everyone else kind of next in order I don't feel really great about, but to just mention a few more names, we have Tiana Taylor for 1001. This movie's been seen by both of us. We both really like this performance. I think this movie may be too small, but we did see last year Bill Nighy went all the way for Living, but Living played at every festival along the way. This movie's not, because it's already came out and had its theatrical release. It did pretty well for a movie of this size, I think it's probably too early, and it's not going to have much staying power once we get into October, November, December, when more festival movies start coming out. Then I have Alicia Vikander for Firebrand. This movie is showing at Cannes. This is something I put on my initial Best Picture Top 25 list. Don't know much about this, but she is an Academy favorite from before. She's won. She's been nominated. So maybe this is a return to form. She gets back in after a few years of just not being in the conversation. And then everyone else, not really sure how to feel. Jessica Lange, I know, is getting a lot of buzz. This seems a lot like The Humans to me, where it's going to have a lot of early buzz and just nothing really comes up about it. But I could be completely wrong, and this is a major player. I know a lot of people have her at either their number 1 or number 2 at this moment. Then some more personal picks here: Zendaya for Challengers, Vanessa Kirby for Napoleon. 2 movies I'm very interested in. I just don't know how interested the Academy will be here. And then I want to give a shout out to the Oscar Expert and Brother Bro. They've been hyping up Flint Strong very well. The premise sounds very interesting, very baity. So maybe Ryan Destiny can get in for her, first breakout type performance.
I would also recommend, if you're taking Zone of Interest seriously, which I think we both are, you should take Sandra Hüller very seriously for this role. It's going to be emotional, it's going to be powerful, and I think it's going to be something that it crosses into that prestige territory. Now, I know that there is a lot of trouble with non-English language performances breaking in, but I'm gonna just say that the trouble that comes with that is more when the actors are not European, meaning white.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. Sadly, that is seeming the case with this acting branch. They seem to be the least likely to come around to some more international and more underrepresented groups. And I guess you could say, like you mentioned, if Zone of Interest is a major player in Picture Director International, it's a lot like Roma from a few years ago, which did get 2 acting nominees. And yes, even though they were not huge names or widely recognizable, performances outside of the Oscars, because one of those performances got nominated with no precursors at all.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that just spoke to how much of a juggernaut Roma was at the time. But yes, a lot of the time you see stuff like Marion Cotillard, who won Best Actress in 2007 for a French performance and was nominated again in 2014 for another French performance. Sandra Hüller feels kind of like that to me. She's a respected German actress who is going to have a great role here, and if this film catches on, it could catapult her to the Oscar conversation. Also, what are you thinking right now about Kaylee Spaney and Priscilla? I know you were feeling very high on her earlier.
I have no faith in Priscilla getting anything. No interest at all from the main focus of award shows like BAFTA, Oscars, Golden Globes, that type of stuff. I think this will do well with critic circles, but I think they just did Elvis last year. They're not going to do another Elvis movie, even if it's completely different. Because, we saw that a few years ago. Bohemian Rhapsody came out, did really well with awards. Next year, Rocketman came out, which many people say is the better movie between the two. That basically got blanketed everywhere.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I would also say Kate Winslet in Lee is a Golden Globes play. I just see that being like Jennifer Aniston and Cake, where it's a performance that is never really a thing, but shows up in like the Satellite Awards and the Golden Globes and a few random groups here and there. That's what it really feels like to me.
Interesting. I could see that. I'm not really high on Lee. I think that's going to be... I mean, we had another Kate Winslet movie a few years ago called Ammonite. This kind of seems a lot like that, where it's on paper, yeah, but when it comes out, no. Like, there's no real, like, gravitational pull towards that movie with voters. But enough of Best Actress. We got a lot of categories to go through today. So, Best Leading Actor. This is a category where you and I have been pretty different so far. So, I'm interested to see where you're shaking up a month later.
This category is giving me a headache. I say that every month about every category, but this one in particular because there's things that I have in my top 5 right now that I just don't think are happening. But I don't know what else to do, and I don't feel confident leaving them out, but I don't feel confident having them in. So let's start with what I feel is a strong frontrunner personally, and that would be Paul Giamatti in The Holdovers. I feel very strongly that Paul Giamatti can win the Oscar for this. I feel like he's great for a nomination, very strong for a win. He's overdue. He's a performer that has been beloved for years, who has never really gotten his moment to shine. He's never been given his flowers. And that even comes down to Sideways came very close to winning Best Picture, and he wasn't even nominated for Best Actor. And that was a fantastic performance. And this is going to be more of that same type of role, the kind of grouchy guy who has that lovable side but is also just an enormous jerk. That's what Paul Giamatti does best, and he's going to own it here. If this is a picture player, he's coming along with it, and he has a strong winning shot. Now, my number 2 and my number 3. I don't want to have either of these in my top 5, but I don't feel confident not having them in my top 5. And that is number 2, Coleman Domingo and Rustin, and number 3, Bradley Cooper and Maestro. And I don't feel confident in either of these. They have not test screened well. Rustin has very mediocre reactions. People saying Coleman Domingo is great, but the movie is eh. And Maestro, people saying the movie's well done. It's boring as hell, but Bradley Cooper is good. And I want to replace these two with passion picks. But ultimately, we know that the Academy is going to gravitate towards biopic performances. We know Bradley Cooper is very, very liked by the Academy as an actor. It doesn't matter if they don't like the movie. They like him as a performer. And even if the movie is nothing, as long as it's not ridiculous, he can still get in for actor. As much as if the movie's bad, I don't want him to get in. And similarly for Coleman Domingo, he's someone that I think really deserves that time to shine at the Oscars. Would I want it to be for a film that, by what everyone's saying, is pretty mediocre? I don't want it to be for that, but I do want him to get something. I don't know. I would love to take these two out of my top 5, but I don't know who I feel confident putting in over them. And that's going to be a funny thing to say, because you guys are going to see the bottom of my list, and you're going to say there's 2, there's 3, maybe there's even 4 that you could easily put in your top 5 over those 2 if you don't want them in there. But I'll talk about all of that later. I have even more reasons to be unconfident about other films down the road.
Yeah, I think with Domingo and Cooper, there's you can go both ways with these. I feel like we know the Academy loves biopic performances. We have 4 major ones on paper this year. So I feel like having at least 2 of them in your predictions is the safe way. It's just which 2 do you lean more towards? The more, I don't want to say auteur, because I don't know if any of these movies are going to be really like that, but the more well-known people or the lesser-known people, in terms of, you could either say that by the actors portraying them or the people they are portraying. So I feel like it's a very interesting way in a route you can go with those performances. But to speak a little bit about Paul Giamatti, I agree. I feel like he's pretty good in there for a nomination. I don't really see the winning angle. We haven't really seen a performance that at least sounds like what this is going to be win here recently. I feel like he could have a very similar path to Colin Farrell from last year, where he's the critics' favorite throughout the early part of the season, but when he gets to some of the major awards, he kind of dips down. He's still in there for a nomination, but he's at number 2, then eventually he's down to number 3. Or he could even perform like Viggo Mortensen back from Green Book, which did win Best Picture, but Viggo was never really number 1 for actor. But he was, pretty consistently number 3 or 4 in nominations all season long. But I do like your top 3. I have 2 of those 3 in my top 5, but let's hear the rest of your top 5.
Anyways, moving on to my number 4 spot, I have Matt Damon in Air. And Matt Damon in Air, I'm putting him in because we've seen this. It feels safe. We know this is a praised performance. And when the year goes along, we'll play the guessing game over and over again, saying, I think this movie is going to be good, so I'll keep it there. And we'll have Matt Damon probably sitting around 6 or 7 the entire time. And then the movies that we are playing guesswork with, that we think are going to be good, that end up not being good, are going to come out and they're not going to be good. And then we're going to be left with, oh, look, it's Matt Damon all along. He's just been there all along. So instead of playing that game and playing the guesswork and keeping Matt Damon at number 7 the entire season long, there's probably people that look more promising right now than Matt Damon, but we've seen this performance. We know at the end of the year, he is going to be in the conversation. Will he get a nomination? I don't know at the end of the day, because maybe miraculously all of these performances end up being as good as they seem on paper, and he doesn't fit into the 5. But we did this with Austin Butler last year. Austin Butler in Elvis, that was in May. I remember seeing people online saying, it's too early to put him in your top 5. Yeah, we've seen the performance, but there could be 5 performances better than that. So it's going to be, at the end of the day, he might not end up in the conversation. We're not going to play that game this year. We know this is good. Let's put him in our top 5 until we're proven wrong and proven that there's better performances out there. Then, at number 5, I'm finishing off my top 5 with you, Teo, in Past Lives. I could shift this one with 2 other performances, I'd say, but I'm going to stick with Yuteo for Past Lives for now, just because the profile of the film, we know it's going to be pretty big, or at least we hope it's going to be pretty big, and I think that the actors are a large part of that. So if the film does well, I think it's because of the actors, and we'll see them get in there, similarly to with Minari a few years ago, which did extremely well as this indie out of Sundance that then bagged nominations for Yoon Ye-jung and Steven Yeun. I see the same thing happening for Greta Lee and Yoo Tae-oh. It's the indie cred, you bring the actors along with you. Even Coda with Troy Kotzer, it's the same type of thing. You need to have some actors that are at the heart of it, and it sounds like Past Lives is a romance with Greta Lee and Yoo Tae-oh anchoring the entire thing, and I think that they're going to get their flowers for that.
I think you make a great point about Matt Damon. I currently have him as my number 5 as well. I think he is going to be, just like you mentioned, in the conversation all year long. We talked about it on our Air review. This movie and him has a pretty likely path for nominations throughout the season. If you look at Damon specifically, he's probably in for Globe Comedy if they go that route with this movie. He's probably getting a Critics' Choice nomination. SAG is not that far out of the question, and then that means he'll probably miss BAFTA, but that's 3 of the 4 major precursors. So that's pretty likely in there, at least in the actor conversation, not in the winning one, but in the last slot type nomination. Who are your next few in line? Because I know there's some major names to some individuals out there, like, why is this not your number 1 or your number 2?
I can feel people yelling at me through the screen already. Like, I can feel people saying, you just said you didn't want Domingo and Cooper, but you don't have Cillian Murphy or Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, I don't have either of them. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I don't have them in there. Killers of the Flower Moon, again, I think that this is a movie that is going to peak very early and is just going to be on a downhill trajectory. Leonardo DiCaprio, I think, is easy. DiCaprio, I think, is one of the easiest nominations to miss here because, from what I read of the script, which was the whole script, it's changed since then, apparently, but DiCaprio's role did not captivate me. It is inherently a less captivating role than Robert De Niro's role. It's also not a clear lead role. You could put this role in supporting, and it would not be mistaken. I would say Jesse Plemons' role was the lead of the script that I read. I was shocked to hear that DiCaprio was going lead. So that's why I have this here at number 6. If the movie comes out and people are raving DiCaprio, I'll put him in. But right now, it feels like a weird placement in lead where they're putting him in with no real reason. The same way that, like, a few years ago, Christian Bale, they put in lead for Ford v Ferrari. And it was just like, why are you doing that when it could be a supporting player? I just don't see him being the thing that people rave about in the movie. It reminds me of The Irishman, with Robert De Niro being left out because the flashier parts of the movie were from Joe Pesci and Al Pacino, who both got nominations, while De Niro got left out. DiCaprio feels along the same lines. I just don't feel confident. Also, Killers of the Flower Moon is not going to get every single nomination that it can get, and if I'm looking at the easiest ones to leave out, DiCaprio and Best Actor is a very, very easy one to leave out of the conversation. Number 7, I feel like I should have Cillian Murphy in for Oppenheimer. I would love to, but I have Oppenheimer underperforming. I also have Rustin and Maestro underperforming. So, you know, you could make the same argument, but I have Oppenheimer getting like 3 or 4 other nominations, but missing picture. And I don't know if I could justify saying it gets editing, it gets sound, it gets score, it gets cinematography, and it gets actor, but it still misses picture. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I think I'd have to put it in picture, and I don't have it in picture. Again, we're going to know very soon if this is a real thing. And at that point, I'll be happy to put Cillian Murphy back in my top 5. And then the last one people are probably yelling me about is Kingsley Ben-Adir in the Bob Marley biopic. I still don't know if this movie's coming out. Also, Ronaldo Marcus Green, who just did King Richard, is directing this movie. And that actually inspires less faith than anything for me, because he, I think, got very lucky with King Richard. He's a workman director. He's a director that he's gonna do a good version of the script that he's given, and it all depends on how good that script is. King Richard was on the blacklist. We knew that was a good script. I'm not sure about Bob Marley. It's all going to depend on how quality that screenplay is, and that's going to be the life that's brought to the movie. I don't know. It's not ringing to me in the same way that King Richard did a few years ago. Even that, I wasn't sure at the time about King Richard. But this feels so much more like Whitney Houston than it does Elvis.
I think that's a good point to make about the Bob Marley biopic. I think that's the movie that we collectively should wait to do, hey, this is in, or hey, this is out, until we get, a trailer or a poster, because all we have is like 1 or 2 set photos, and set photos can kind of go either way depending on who takes them. But for DiCaprio, I agree that he probably would be an easy nomination to leave out. But on the other hand, we've seen DiCaprio coast in with movies that are big Best Picture players, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He got in for Best Lead Actor, even though he was not really in the lead conversation, but to be devil's advocate, he was solidly in
there. I mean, he was my favorite in the category.
I mean, like, he was in the conversation to get nominated, but I don't think he was ever in the conversation to win the award. But to play devil's advocate on the other side, Don't Look Up, Best Picture nominee. He misses, even though he got some precursors. So I think Killers can go either way. Its ceiling is DiCaprio gets in like Once Upon a Time. The ceiling is DiCaprio gets in for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Kind of like that. He's number 2, number 3 in the category, where he's nominated everywhere, but he's not really winning anywhere. Or he's like Don't Look Up, where he may show up at BAFTA, or he may show up at SAG, but he's not hitting every precursor. He ultimately misses out for one of these biopic performances, or Matt Damon.
Quick shout-outs. Christian Friedel, The Zone of Interest. I mentioned before, if that movie's a big contender, we have to take the actors seriously. Barry Keoghan, Saltburn. I'm not confident in Saltburn, but apparently Keoghan is fantastic in that. Then there's also Ed Harris, Long Day's Journey into Night. If Jessica Lange is a big thing, maybe that, but I think it might just be the Jessica Lange show. Andre Holland in The Actor. This sounds very weird. It is going to be probably too brainy for the Academy, too offbeat, but I'm excited to see what he does there. Anthony Hopkins, Freud's Last Session. This is based on a play. It's going to be another powerhouse performance from Anthony Hopkins, of course, but I haven't heard great things about the play. It's an off-Broadway play that, and the director is not a big name either, so I don't know. It's not inspiring too much hope, but maybe it happens. As well, Andrew Scott in Strangers is really worth taking note of, because that film could still be a huge thing. As well, Jamie Vidal in El Conde. I've talked a lot about El Conde and about my hopes for that film. Normally, if you're going to have a non-English language performance, it's not going to be from a South American film. It's going to be from a European film, as mentioned before. But Jamie Vidal is a very well-respected actor in Chile, and he is playing Augusto Pinochet, one of the most ruthless dictators in the history of the world. So that is an interesting premise for me. I don't know. Those are kind of the ones I'm looking at on the horizon. Ultimately, what I'm going to say is, of my top 5, I feel confident in Giamatti, Damon, and kinda Teo. I want to take out Coleman Domingo and Bradley Cooper. I just don't know who I feel good putting there instead.
Those all make sense. For me, moving over into the supporting categories, I mentioned earlier, Best Actress, I didn't have much movement there. But Best Supporting Actor, I have a lot of movement here because I still have, you could say, a risky pick at number 1, but that's what these early predictions are for, is to take big risks. So you don't want to go with the consensus because this is a category where we have not really had the early frontrunner win in quite a long time. So at number 1, I have De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon. I know there's the argument for Plemons, but De Niro just missed out for Irishman. There's a narrative that he is getting a little bit older. He may not have a chance to really return to the Academy for another win later down in his career. This could be his last hurrah. From what I've heard about the script, from the book, this is a very evil type performance, which we know the Academy is more likely to reward a supporting actor or a lead actor in some more villain type performances. And I don't know, this just feels like a category where killers could win, but at the same time, supporting actress is a category like that, and if it's winning both supporting, then it's probably stronger in picture, but at the same time, I don't really feel great about anyone else, so I feel like at this point, it's best to take the risk here than to take the risk with some of these other names going forward, because I have another risk at number 2, and the Barbie hype train is coming around to Dylantown, because Ryan Gosling's at number 2. As I mentioned with Margot Robbie before, all the hype for Barbie is feeding into Gosling. And I feel like even if this movie misses picture, he could maybe squeak his way into the supporting actor lineup. And who knows, if this is a real picture like winner contender, this is Warner Brothers' main push, Gosling could be like a Ke Huy Quan, where he is the early person who's in a wacky type weird movie that's funny and people just gravitate to a very likable actor. Gosling obviously doesn't have the narrative that Quan had, but he has the likability. People are drawn towards him. And I don't know, I feel like at minimum he's getting a Golden Globe nomination and probably SAG, and going from there that can only grow.
I suppose so. I won't harp on Barbie more than I already have. I would love to see Gosling get in. I think if he does get in, he has winning potential. I'm just not sure. I really just don't. I don't know how this movie's going to actually end up playing with voting demographics.
That is fair, and that's a question I've struggled with a lot of movies at this point. I know we mentioned last episode when we were doing some of our major categories, I don't feel as good this year as I did last year. Like last year, there was some more of those risk movies I just felt good about, like Avatar, like Elvis, where like, yeah, maybe these aren't going to win major awards, even though I was saying they were each going to take at least one big one, but I felt good they were going to be in the conversation. But this year, besides our obvious top 3, top 4, those next line of movies I don't really feel great about. But one movie I kind of feel good about at this moment, and that's because of its early raves out of Sundance's past life. So I have it getting another acting nomination here for John Magaro. And I don't know, I don't feel like he can win. I've seen people say like, oh, he's in the winning conversation. I haven't seen the movie, but
really?
I don't know if they will go this way from what the trailer looks like and from just what I've read about the movie and whatnot, but a nomination seems pretty good, and at that point is where we get our color purple representation here. Corey Hawkins is my number 4. I predicted him in years past to no avail, whether it's Straight Outta Compton, whether if it was Tragedy Macbeth. Both times it wasn't really in the conversation at all, but you know, he seems to have a more prominent role here in color purple, so I am having him at my number 4 slot. Maybe he could be in the winning competition, maybe not. But those next 2 in line, do you have any major thoughts about them while I try to decide who I want at 5? Because I had a list here, but I don't feel good about it, so I'm kind of changing on the fly.
So I feel very, very similar to you with this category in that I really don't know what the hell to do here. Personally, I have someone that you have not mentioned yet as my number one because I've read the script and I know that this role has a lot of juicy scenes and a lot of moments that you can really chew on as a performer. Robert De Niro at number one, I'm a little bit cautious of, I'd say. Um, I don't know. I don't know if they'd give De Niro another Oscar at this point. You could say the same thing about Frances McDormand a few years ago, but I am so much lower on Killers of the Flower Moon than everyone else is, and I don't think it's going to be in winning conversation for anything except Lily Gladstone by the end of its run. Otherwise, John Magaro, I am very glad to see him in your top five. I don't think I have him personally, but I feel like I could put him up there. And Corey Hawkins, I mean, I'm glad to see you riding the Color Purple. I'm glad to see you riding the Color Purple hype train with me. Train is leaving the station. All aboard. This one looks. I think Corey Hawkins can do it here. I think that this is the right role.
So this brings me to my fifth place in Best Supporting Actor. And do I go a double nomination here in Supporting Actor as well as in Supporting Actress? Normally it's just one, but last year we had one in each category, and I don't know if that's going to repeat this year. So I think I'm going to have Jesse Plemons on the outside looking in. I know most people have it flipped where they have Plemons in and De Niro out, but as we've seen in years past, Fabelmans, Belfast, the older, more respected actor gets in, while the younger, upcoming actor misses. So I have Plemons as my number 7. The person that you mentioned, Charles Melton, is my number 6 for May December. I agree. If this movie's a picture player, he's in. But with no distributor yet, I'm going to be cautious with the majority of my predictions at the moment. And I think I just have it in for screenplay and actress, and everything else is on the outside looking in. But as soon as a studio picks up, whether it's your Netflix prediction or someone else, yeah, picture, go in there. Supporting actor, go in there, and more could come along. So my number 5, there's 2 real places I'm leaning here. I could go with a more inspired pick with Paul Dano and Dumb Money, but we've heard mixed things on this performance. Not this performance, but this movie, and we don't know if this performance is lead or supporting, but it did get some reactions out of CinemaCon from some sort of ads or trailers that they may have shown that seemed pretty positive, so he's in the conversation. I'm going to leave him out. So I have Rami Youssef getting in as my 5th slot for Poor Things. Does this seem likely? No, but at the same time, Matt and I are going to start reading this book shortly. We'll be able to tell more, but from at least the description, it sounds like he is in this movie a lot, to the point where he could even be lead, but most likely they'll put him in supporting. Category fraud, you could call it, but I don't think he has a shot in lead, while in supporting he could. But also, Willem Dafoe seems to have a pretty prominent role. I know every year people's like, oh, Willem Dafoe's in for this movie, he's in for that movie. He's never in the conversation. But if Poor Things is for real, and he's in the movie for at least 30 or 40% instead of just one scene, maybe he's in for real. But I'm leaning more towards Youssef. He's a fresh face. We see at least usually one new actor in the lineup each year. Like we saw Brian Tyree Henry last year, maybe that's Rami Youssef this year.
So what I'll say about Poor Things here, so Rami Youssef is going to be a larger role from what I've seen so far. So Willem Dafoe plays the scientist that creates Bella Baxter, who is Emma Stone, and Rami Youssef plays Max McCandless, who is the man that marries Bella Baxter. And so the story is kind of just about her path through the world, and I think Rami Youssef is mostly by her side as she learns about the world, and I don't know too much about it. Again, we'll have more information next week because we will have read a bunch of the book at that point.
My number 10, though, is another international contender from a European film. We have La Chimère, represented by Josh O'Connor. From what I understand, he will be speaking in English in this role, just the rest of the movie won't be in English, so maybe it's more receptible to a more English-speaking demographic that it makes up the acting committee at the Oscars. But at the same time, this movie is no longer my number 1 in international features, so I doubt a movie that's number 2 or number 3 in that category will get an acting nomination over the movies that are number 1 and number 2. But just to give a quick shout out to 2 other names that had previously been on my list that have fallen off. We have Brian Tyree Henry for Flint Strong. He got nominated last year. This movie is something. Maybe Barry Jenkins did write this script. However, I don't know if he's going to get in back-to-back years for non-winning performances. And then we have Glenn Turman for Rustin. He was pretty much in the conversation for Ma Rainey, but missed out at the end of the day. But my faith in Rustin is dropping by the day, so I don't really see the point of having them in my lineup at the moment. But they're two names who could be in your 10, but probably shouldn't be in your 5.
Good shouts. I would also like to see some strangers representation here, either from Paul Mescal or from Jamie Bell. Again, I'm going to keep harping on strangers being a very possible contender on the horizon, and the actors feel good for that. I don't have them in my top 5, but I feel like they very easily could make it in there. I would also say keep an eye out. I know you don't have faith in Long Day's Journey into Night, but you got to keep an eye out for Ben Foster with that. Otherwise, I don't really know what's going on in this category. Do you think that anyone from Air could potentially make a play for Best Supporting Actor? Chris Tucker, Jason Bateman?
It would be the guy you didn't mention, Ben Affleck. But no, I don't see anyone from this movie. Because when you think of Air, you think of its script, then you think of Damon, and then you think of Davis. But there's so many supporting actors, I don't think any of them will rise above the rest. But if one did, it would be Damon. But if one did, it would be Affleck, because you can't represent him in director, because there's not really a directing type nomination with this movie. But you'd be like, oh, he directed and he acted, and he kind of wrote the movie too, but he's not getting credit for it. We like Ben Affleck. Let's get him in here. But I don't think it's enough for a nomination. But who knows? Maybe he could make another Tender Bar run where he shows up randomly at the Globes and at SAG, but misses. But I don't think this is the role for that.
Yeah, I have no idea what to do in this category. This is another one where I just don't think we know all of the contenders at this point. I agree. We haven't seen them.
I know I just made the case for a Killer's Boy winning in Supporting Actor, but I think we agree a Killer's Girl is going to win in Supporting Actress.
I do feel very strongly about Lily Gladstone in Supporting Actress for Killers of the Flower Moon. Reason being, when I read the script, this is the one role that I read and went, oh wow, that's a juicy performance. Like, she gets to do such a range of emotions. Essentially, her character starts off the story because she starts to notice that her family members are dying and everyone is writing it off as like, this is just a coincidence. And she's the one who starts to put the pieces together and says, this is not a coincidence. Something is happening. This is murder. People are not just getting sick and dying or just going missing. Someone is killing people. So she's the one who starts the story off, and then through the story she kind of gets, I won't go too deep into spoiler territory, but she gets to do some really, really heavy stuff in this. It's very hard to talk about without getting into any spoiler territory, but yes, she plays a role that is going to be juicy, very, very juicy for awards buzz, I think. And even if this film kind of flops, I think she can have a powerhouse performance that really, really lands. Also, it is, again, worth mentioning, Killers of the Flower Moon is a film about missing and murdered Indigenous women and peoples, and to have a film like that out there and have most of the faces representing this film be white faces, it's not a great look. So if you're going to honor Killers of the Flower Moon, you have to honor the Indigenous faces that are a part of this film, and that means Lily Gladstone, who is, you know, the main Indigenous character here. The only thing that I see as a road bump here is Lily Gladstone could easily take the Michelle Williams route and go lead for this role, which would be a huge mistake because the character is kind of, it's a juicy role, and even though I would say that she is the main character of the story, she's kind of out of commission for like a large chunk of the movie. No spoilers there, just take that for what you will. She's the main character, main focus, but she's not always in the film. So putting her in supporting would be the best choice here, and I'm really scared that they're not going to do it.
I have more faith they'll keep her in supporting because what we learned after the fact from Michelle Williams is the fact that she wanted to be in lead herself. It wasn't the studio. So I feel like unless Gladstone says like, no, I want to be in lead, they'll probably keep her here. But we'll find that out pretty shortly. This does have its premiere in just about a month's time. So first reactions will be out. And who knows, we could hear this is a season sweeper, this is a letdown, this is a lead, or we're confirmed this is a supporting. But I think its roadblock, where I am predicting this for number one, comes with your next in line. Because if one of these two don't get nominated, I feel like that other one could possibly win.
So the next one that I have up is Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. I think that this is going to be a fantastic role. I think it's going to show so much joy and life and humor. It's going to be a great comedic role that balances perfectly off of Paul Giamatti's grumpy curmudgeon character. I just have such high hopes for Divine Joy Randolph in this. I don't think I've seen her in a whole lot of other things, but this film just has me so stoked to see what she does with this role. Because if she's cast here alongside this group in this film, she's cast for a reason. And if I think that The Holdovers is going to be big, which I do, you know, she's very high up for supporting actress. After that, Julianne Moore in May December. You've mentioned before May December. Yes, we don't have a distributor for this. That is concerning. However, again, I've read the script. I know how I feel about that script. I have a feeling either the film has already been secretly bought, or the alternative, more likely answer is that they are waiting until Cannes reactions come out so that they can get a higher number from the sale. That's very likely to me. The film's going to get rave reviews at Cannes, and everyone is going to be clamoring to buy the film, and they're going to be able to sell the film for much more than they would have been able to beforehand, because now studios know how much it's worth. After that, I've got Danielle Brooks at number 4 for The Color Purple, and number 5, Taraji P. Henson for The Color Purple. I don't feel great about having both of them in, but I don't know which one to put over the other. Taraji P. Henson is more of a name in Hollywood. She's a previous Oscar nominee. However, Danielle Brooks is in the role that's been nominated on Broadway for the Tony. Danielle Brooks herself was nominated for that role, and Danielle Brooks is an up-and-coming name that a lot of people are talking about. So it's really the status versus role thing that I'm looking at here, and I'm not sure which way to go.
This is when I mentioned before these next two could be a winning. If one of them doesn't get nominated, would be with the two Color Purple ladies, because I feel like if they're both here, they play like the favorite, where they cancel each other out, where clearly they're number 2 and 3. It's just no one can say, hey, this one's 1 and this one's 2. They flip-flop. But if it's just Brooks or just Henson, I could see an angle for one of them to win this award. But I'm also predicting this to be our double nomination for the year. So I have Gladstone at 1, but these are my 2 and 3, and I feel pretty good about having them both in, but I could also see the angle where it's something like we've seen with previous ensemble type movies, where it's just like, oh, we just can't find one, and then just one squeaks in, or sadly they both could miss in lieu of like Women Talking. But I don't think this movie will have the screener issues that Women Talking had, so I feel like at least one is safe, if not both.
Right now, I don't know who is going to be in from the Color Purple ladies, so I'm just going to put both of them in for now. And really, my slot 5 is going to be either Tilda Swinton in The Killer or Viola Davis in Air. Now, the reason I'm a little bit high on The Killer right now, we have heard from a not very trustworthy source that The Killer has screened and has outstanding reactions. And Tilda Swinton, if The Killer ends up being a big push for Netflix, if this ends up being a huge thing, Tilda Swinton can get in. She's only ever had one nomination and win before. She is a beloved performer, and this might be the shot that she needs to get into the conversation again. But we don't know a lot about her role. On the other hand, we do know about Viola Davis's role in Air. We have seen it, and it's one that I had in my top 5 up until very recently. As I started thinking, like, this role just feels so small. There's not a whole lot going on in this role. Does she do a great job? Yes, but it is a very small performance in terms of just scope. When we look at how many minutes some of these other people are going to be on screen, Julianne Moore is going to be on screen for like almost half of May, December. Lily Gladstone is on screen for going to be probably an hour and a half of Killers of the Flower Moon or more. Divine Joy Randolph is going to be the second to lead character in the movie versus Viola Davis in Air. We've seen it. She's on screen for maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
I feel like if anyone else was in that role for Air, it's not in the conversation. The only reason we and other people are having the conversation is because how big of a name Viola Davis is, what happened last year, as well as she's always consistent for a SAG nomination regardless of what movie it is. So it's going to have at least one precursor. It's just can it attach more. Specifically, if Air is MGM and Amazon's main push, it gets a Best Picture play, where other films like Saltburn or whatever else Amazon and MGM have on the docket aren't really getting that push. But what's the rest of your top 10?
I would say I don't really feel very confident in anything below Viola Davis at number 7. So I'll just fill it out with Carey Mulligan in Maestro. I think that she's going to be hit with the controversy of playing a Latina woman in this role. I don't think it's going to play well. Claire Foy in Strangers, I think could do really well, but I still... Strangers is on the horizon for me. I don't know whether it's going to be big, whether it's going to be nothing at all, but Claire Foy is worth mentioning. Isabella Rossellini for La Chimera is one that's very fascinating to me because Isabella Rossellini is a international sensation. She's a legend, basically exclusively on her career. But we saw a few years ago, Sophia Loren did not make it in for The Life After. So I don't know. I don't think this will happen, but it's possible. Also worth mentioning, Penelope Cruz and Shailene Woodley for Ferrari. I don't know much about Ferrari, and it doesn't inspire a whole lot of hope in me. And then 2 blockbusters, Florence Pugh, Oppenheimer, and Zendaya in Dune Part 2. I don't know what to think about either of those two, but they are, again, on the horizon for me.
And I would include one more on the horizon. If you are someone out there predicting Bob Marley biopic to get some nominations, Lashana Lynch is playing his wife in the movie, so could be a King Richard type situation, a follow-up for Ronaldo Marcus Green, but at the same time, I'm holding out. I have moved Benedict out of my Actor 5, so I'm holding out on this movie until I get some more information, some more visual stuff like that. If a trailer comes out, it looks good, or there's an early test screen or something like that, I'll move these back up. For the moment, they're all like in the area, just not in.
Yeah, I don't want to make the mistake I did with I Want to Dance with Somebody last year, which is like, we should have waited to see something from that film. Like, yeah. we totally, with these formulaic biopics, you gotta wait until you know something. Otherwise, the assumption is the reason you're not seeing anything is just because it's a mediocre biopic, like any other.
Great point. So everyone out there, let us know, what biopic are you predicting this year to be mediocre, and which ones are you going to predict for real? Because Best Actor has like 4 or 5 in the conversation, and we're not going to get all 5 in there. So let us know down below. But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.